Okay. When would you like to begin? Should I just, oh, there we go. All right, good, Mailing?
You're all set.
All right, what's going on, everyone? Good morning or afternoon. Today we have Matt Breyer, a new construction builder, and right now he has some stuff within the city limits, and he's going to be talking about the lack of new construction in our area and some troubles and stuff that he has to overcome in order to get the projects rolling. Again, this is Matt Breyer. Feel free to take it away, bro.
Hey, thanks, Brandon. Guys, I appreciate the opportunity to chat today. I'm pretty casual. As you can see, I'm not wearing a suit, so I don't get offended if there's a question or I said something you just didn't hear it. You really feel like, hey, can we pause and just reiterate on that? Let me know. I've got a bunch of comments and thoughts I'm looking forward to sharing, but I'll also try and stop a couple of times as well, just to ask for questions. So like I said, as we go through the process, if there's something I can answer or better articulate, I'm not offended. Just yell at me. Thought it might be worth just starting out, kind of give you a little bit of background bio on who I am, why I'm sitting here, other than the gracious invitation to pull me in on this. I've been in construction really ever since I could hold a hammer. I've always been intrigued by the opportunity to take raw materials and turn them into something and build. And that's driven me to where right about 20 years ago, I formed Breyer Construction and Landscape. It's our residential remodeling company, emphasis on design and building outdoor living spaces. As a firm, it's what has allowed me the opportunity to have literally thousands and thousands of interactions with homeowners and hear their heart, their fears, their ideas, their concerns, and get a better understanding of what drives people to make purchase decisions and why they might opt to remodel or improve something they already have, as opposed to going out and buying something new, or what led them to make this new purchase that now they want to personalize and turn into their own space. About a decade ago, we formed a new construction company, Crestwan Heritage. It's the one Brandon mentioned that's building within the city limits of Reading, which is this anomaly in and of itself. And that came about as we looked at the skill set of our employees and what they were doing with us, as well as where they had come from and the past experiences. And we started to evaluate opportunities in our local marketplace and some gaps that were overlooked or we felt were underserved. And an interest as well as a company in wanting to diversify just a bit of who we were and what we did so we had better stability, but do it in a way that it didn't dilute our brand and our core focus. So we started that other company. It's a separate entity. It focuses on new construction. It's modular-based construction. So big pieces of house show up and get set by a crane rather than the traditional stick-built construction, which is predominantly what our remodeling company does. And we also wanted to target those infill areas or those overlooked lots or smaller areas that could be built out, as opposed to the traditional development model, which was seen more as go buy a big field or take a farm and turn it into a subdivision. We wanted to start with just those small little niche properties and some of that build out opportunity. Last company we have is a Excavation Company, started about 3 years ago. It's my little baby firm. And predominantly that's set up to serve the new home company and the remodeling company. And that was just a way for me to interject myself back into the field in a different aspect where I can kind of snoop on everything and see how things are going, assisting from literally a subcontractor position, and stack our companies a little bit so that we're providing services to ourselves rather than always outsourcing everything. Because of those three different firms and the different needs and opportunities with each of them. It's given me some cool insight into how things work or don't work with construction in our local environment. Additionally, I've been a member of the Chamber of Commerce in Berks County as well as Lancaster County. I've been on the board of directors with the Home Builders Association here in Berks County. I've served on the board of the North American Deck and Rail Association. They focus a lot on that outdoor living and raw material categories. And I am happily the immediate past president of that association. So I'm enjoying not having all of the weekly and daily responsibilities there, and I can happily hand those reins over to others at this time. Those different boards and the opportunities to have unique conversations that otherwise wouldn't have happened if I had just stayed here in Berks County and just focused on my businesses has allowed me the opportunity to travel, to be part of planning, to advise and consult with some national and international business partners, and talk to builders around the country, as well as manufacturers and material providers around the country, and do so in a way where I'm able to have a bit more of a casual conversation at times as we talk about perhaps a particular niche industry and its needs. But I'm able to gather a wider range of feedback and information than I otherwise would have had. I've also, in those travels, used the opportunity or the excuse to go snoop on other areas. I like traveling. I like seeing what's out there, and I'm convinced I don't know everything, and I've got a bunch to learn. So I might have had last couple of weeks, I had a NADRA meeting down in Florida, took the opportunity on the way down to spend a few days in the Augusta, Georgia, Aiken, South Carolina market. And then hung out in Florida for about a week. On the way back up through, I was in Chattanooga, Tennessee area, spent most of the time just south of the border into Georgia, and then worked my way back from there. And when I'm in different areas of the country, I'm looking for the opportunities, how they're addressing opportunities in those areas, what the differences are, demographics, building styles, road styles, how they handle infrastructure, how builders are handling or addressing needs and concerns, and then just go in and I try and go in with kind of a humble attitude, say, okay, what do I not know? What could I learn? What can I take away from this and go be better back home? When I was researching this topic, and I was thinking, okay, new home construction, local, and I started thinking about, my business, the challenges we've faced, and others I've talked to in the local market. It led me down a bunch of different paths of research. So I apologize if you see me keep looking down at my notes to make sure I'm not missing something really, really big. But some of what I've came up with validated frustrations that I've got locally, or opportunities that I've seen locally because I've seen it work or not work somewhere else. But I also realized that every line of train of thought I was having on this I should go research this or figure this out, there'd be this divergent issue that kind of intersect, and I couldn't stay true to that first line of research because this other thing interacted with it and created some sort of a conflict, which required that I looked at that as well. And so this really simple thing of, hey, here in Berks County, we need more housing. Mostly we need new construction. We got a bunch of old stuff, but we need new construction housing. We need better layouts, better thought processes, and bringing this to market because our clients are hurting and they're frustrated and they can't afford what we have. They don't have options in the different price lines and categories. And it's a convoluted issue and there isn't a simple solution. So if you'll bear with me, and if I'm terrible, just mute me and go away. But I thought I'm going to do my best to take a kind of a really big picture approach, start at the top with some of the industry trends and the long-term systemic challenges that I'm seeing on a more national or international level. And I'm going to jump into some regional considerations and compare and contrast. Then I'll go local and talk about some local issues. And a lot of the stuff you guys you're already familiar with it. So it's not always going to be brand new information, but I'm going to try and do my best to tie stuff together. And then when all hope feels lost, I'm going to bring up a couple of opportunities and ideas that I'm seeing local specific and what we can do going from here to make some impacts and some improvements, and hopefully at the end of the day run better businesses and be more successful and have happier people, happier clients that we're working with. So before I start in on that, I'll pause. Any initial questions or concerns? Anything I can address for anyone on the call?
I wanted to just say thank you, Matt, for doing this. And I think it's really interesting that we're having this discussion. I know, as the association, as the Realtors Association, like I know our members are having trouble with, especially buyer's agents, because you can't get into a house quick enough and they're flying off the market. And, people are really eager to move, especially after kind of things are starting to move quicker after the pandemic and everything. And, I think this is a problem that we've definitely taken super seriously here at the association. I know we're not the Builders Association, but your business totally affects what our realtors are seeing. And I think it's awesome. I'm sure your problems and what the things that you're going to talk about are things that all of our builders in Berks are really, kind of familiar with. So I'm just glad you took the time to kind of have this discussion with us. Thanks.
Thank you. Now, I appreciate the opportunity, and I'm going to do my best to not bash on any builder, people group, position, job, political affiliation or anything. So as I'm talking, it's really an attempt to just recognize what's going on, where the changes are, but I'm not intending any sort of malice or personal attack or anything like that. So I'll put that out in the front, that I'm going to try and stay away from naming names or hinting at things, even though at times you can draw your own conclusions. It's not intended maliciously. It's just not. We're all in this together. There's opportunity for everyone here. And those that are truly successful, I believe, will be those that recognize the environment they work in, adapt and adjust to overcome obstacles, provide solutions, and move forward with a positive attitude. So it sounds corny, but that's my heart belief. So I give that little disclaimer up front. All right, so let's jump up to that national, international level. When we're looking at housing, we've got a whole bunch of stuff that goes into housing. And material's an easy one to look at. It's a whole bunch of lumber that goes into building, and a bunch of steel and other things as well. But roughly 30% of the lumber that goes into new home construction is imported. Most of that comes from Canada. It does come from elsewhere around the globe as well, but a lot of it comes from Canada, just the way it's happened for many, many years. A little idiosyncrasy is right now there's actually a glut of lumber in the southeast of the United States. And lumber prices, when you're looking at logs or trees that are still standing, is actually a bit stagnant right now. So there's a little bit of inequality in that lumber component. Even though if you go to Home Depot, you'll see material prices have gone up 3, 4, 5, 6 times what they were a year to a year and a half ago. So really crazy things in that system when you look at just the lumber aspect. Another component of just big hunks of building materials is in the fasteners, hardware, connectors, and appliances, and some of the HVAC components and some of those bigger, you might think appliances and think fridge, but it's also the heater, the air conditioner, and some of those components. Most of that's imported. There are regional and national manufacturers of these components, but still a lot of those components are imported. Or it could be a component that's fabricated and put together in Ohio, but it still has different microchips that come overseas, or some different coils or something that are sourced globally. So when we look at utilization of building materials, we're going to inevitably be affected by international trade and logistics and any pinch points. When a ship gets stuck in a canal around the globe, is going to mess up how we build here in Berks County at some level. And in normal times, we might not feel it because that little blip is mostly leveled out by the time it gets here. When everything's pinched across the system, that blip gets felt. We also have the challenge as well as it comes to labor, and we think about national, international challenges. This is more of a systemic mindset that for the last, I always thought 40 years, I've been told it's as much as 80 years. We have discounted working with our hands or pursuing a career in some sort of a trade, and really focused and encouraged people to pursue a college degree with some sort of a technical aspect. And so we've created this gap in our trade careers and people that can build and create things here at home. And while we've attempted over the last couple of decades to import that, a lot of times it's not at a skilled level, but an unskilled level that still requires the training and adaptation to our building techniques and practices and codes. And so there's some gaps there that haven't been satisfied. And that's challenging because there's built-in systemic issues that aren't fully resolved. Now, the next little bit gets a little bit political, but it's not intended to be pro or con in any way. Again, that disclaimer. Our immediately previous administration changed where some of the directions were going in terms of how we looked at globalization, trade imbalances, or where manufacturing was headquartered or built. And we saw a big nationalist rise as there was a push over those several years to start bringing factories home, rebuilding factories here, making things here, and a little less of that wide open trade. And towards the end of that administration, we started seeing manufacturers on steel and automotive and some appliance manufacturers talk about opening up new factories here, and some of that kind of, you could just slowly see things transitioning to a little bit more home-based construction or building on those raw materials. With the change to the current administration, there's a lot of upheaval happening right now. We're in the pinch point of a new administration, and there are some different perspectives. We've seen some policies rolled back, some changes in priorities, and we've seen that happen at the same time that we have the repercussions of the COVID lockdowns. Now, in those lockdowns, obviously, we're all doing this by Zoom, sitting here in our different offices and home offices and everything else, instead of having some get together at a restaurant or a conference room. And this works. But a lot of companies have moved towards this kind of meeting instead of forcing everyone to drive into a specific building in a city and run things there. And that's changing how we run our lives and how we use our space and all those personal adjustments. And it's changing the corporate adjustments as they rethink the things they should be building, how they should support their work staff, and where they should be located. At the same time, by talking about those divergent things, at the same time that we're seeing trade policies perhaps pause in a direction they were headed and maybe reconsider going back to some past ways or some sort of a hybrid there. And so we've seen companies cancel. I just saw the one steel company canceled plans for a steel mill out in Pittsburgh. And we've seen some other pauses or plans put on hold. And I think some of that is these big corporations trying to figure out, in this turmoil and uncertainty on a couple of different fronts, how they best adjust their long-term plans to be building the factory in the right place that's going to meet the right needs and all of that. And on an underlying thing, I mentioned earlier, the 30% of our raw lumber is imported. So on something like that, this is an ideal time if you're an international firm that works in lumber as well as wood fibers, this is your time to put all of your efforts and resources in helping to improve how trade policies are done in a way that will help you the best long term. So if you want to have access to international markets, or you want to make sure that you can buy and bring in unrestricted or with the smallest amount of penalties or something like that, that's where your focus is going to be right now while the books are kind of being rewritten. So that just trickles down to us right now as those firms that turn wood into paper or lumber, they're not going to be dropping the $100 million onto a new lumber mill right now until they know, should it be here or Alberta, Canada, or Lithuania or something else. And they're going to put all of those available dollars into make sure they have really good relationships with every congressperson that they have access to, and every lobbyist is writing appealing papers and having the right parties and bringing the right people together so that they can present their perspective. So that's what's going on behind the scenes, and it's just trickling down to us that things aren't changing. So when we talk about, you'll hear builders complain about, we don't have raw materials. We don't have the raw materials because nothing in the system can get changed quick enough to help us right now. And no one wants to change that system simply because they don't know which way to help nudge it to change, other than they want it to benefit themselves. So we're in a season of hurt that when I was asked about 6 months ago, and I was reaching out to different industry contacts and stuff, we actually thought we would have lumber shortages and all of those pinch points related to the general building industry resolved by at some point here, first quarter 2021. Now that we're out of first quarter 2021 and we still have all of the same issues and they're getting worse. Unfortunately, I'm the bearer of the bad news on that side to say, yeah, there's no silver bullet or salvation coming down the pike on a big picture level that will just fix things for us. So we have some troubled waters to continue to try and sludge through over the next kind of foreseeable future. Let's make sure I didn't overlook something critical. Any questions on that national, international, big picture type stuff before I jump into a little bit more regionally based?
I just have a quick question. So obviously, like last year, the pandemic shut down most industries. I mean, just even in Pennsylvania. So I assume that goes for like the wood, lumber industry and as well. The lockdowns or shutdowns were lifted at different points throughout the US last year. Are we still seeing like a backlog from those shutdowns that's causing like a delay or, lumber prices to be a lot higher? Or are we looking at a more systemic problem where like, you can't find employees to actually get the lumber, to market?
Fortunately, my answer is yes, it's all of the above.
Okay.
So all of those things are very real, very valid, and problematic and need to be addressed, which sucks because then it's like there's 50 different targets we have to be looking at, not just one that we can all pool our resources, go after and go make it happen. The lockdowns hurt. I have a contact at a lumber mill in Virginia that I was chatting with throughout last year. And when the pandemic initially hit and the lockdown started to come through, they shut the mill down. And that's, I hate to use this word because it's been used so often, but it was unprecedented. Sorry. Mills don't shut down. They are designed because they're such an expensive operation. They can ramp up a little, they can pull back a little bit, and have big yards to hold material that they can kind of fluctuate or balance out some of the raw material coming in and the finished material going out. But as an entity, they're designed to run at near maximum capacity all the time. So if you shut that thing down, it's not designed to shut down well. It doesn't restart well. And so that creates a big blip. But all the mills are back up and running, and they are having issues with personnel. Some of the really good benefits that were given out for unemployment, if you could sit at home and make as much or more than you made doing back-breaking manual work, it's really hard to talk people into coming in. And you can offer additional benefits, you can offer some additional wages, but all of that's kind of not a lagging, not leading indicator here. And sometimes it takes a while to have those conversations and to find the money, because you haven't sold the product because you did shut down. So you don't actually have a whole bunch of money just sitting there to give out. And it could be on futures that upon delivery, where you'll have the money eventually to make those bigger pay increases, but you don't have it today. So we still have some of those issues working through. But largely the mills are back up and running, and they're running at full capacity, and they're doing everything they can. So without building new mills, which takes several years and tens to hundreds of millions of dollars, that pinch point can't get much further massaged than where it is right now, unfortunately. Did that answer your question, or did I just ramble? All right, cool. Thank you. Let me come down a little bit closer and talk regionally. Regionally, we're here on I'll say the East Coast of the country. We were one of the earliest areas to be built up, colonized, if you will, and have infrastructure put in place and housing. And that's cool. We've got all that awesome history of Boston and Philadelphia and Baltimore and everything else. But we're also left with an aging housing stock that's gobbled up a lot of the land, and it's surrounded by aged or perhaps even contaminated industrial zones and areas that those industries have died out or moved elsewhere or been choked out. It could be regulation. It could have just been opportunity elsewhere, changing demographics, whatever. But we've got some old archaic industrial land that is big, and it's just not really being used. And then we've got roads wrapping around, and especially here, like, my goodness, Pennsylvania, we've got all the hills and valleys and stuff like that. So we've got roads twisting and turning and into those older cities where those roads were built 200 to 300 years ago, and they weren't designed for modern truck traffic. So we have these built-in logistical pinch points that don't allow us to maximize the use of that space. Those are regional systemic challenges that can't easily be addressed, in part because things move very, very slowly. We don't have kings over little kingdoms that can be, hey, this road sucks with the on-ramps, and then a quarter mile later, there's an off-ramp. And if we just connected them, we'd have faster travel between these areas. You have to have local councils and municipalities get together and have safety studies and traffic studies, and then look for funding and look at local funding drives and federal funding and all that stuff. And it just takes years. And you have all these opinions and stuff that get in the way, and it just slows things down. So that's a regional challenge that we have with abandoned factories, tight roadways, and a bunch of land already used up. Now, I will say you don't see that kind of a challenge in a different area of the country. Like, I'll pick on Texas. Texas, big open flat area. And as they've grown, they've just planned for growth. So they put in, this 20-lane highway that's nice and straight with, 6 off ramps and a planned business park. And it's all new, it's all modern, and it all works. So as a company looking to grow somewhere, it's a lot easier to go look at an industrial park down there that they'll build for you and have it set up perfectly, as opposed to retrofitting something that might have, I don't know, a Superfund site attached to it or something else up here. The opportunity is under the surface. And I think the opportunity is actually best for those regional players already integrated into those regional markets. We know our area better than anyone else. And so a big manufacturing company might send someone out and then just move on to the next place. We will always, in a regional perspective, know where the opportunity areas are, the underserved areas, the abandoned industrial park that with a little bit of work could be turned into a modern multi-use development if the right players are pulled together. That's the sort of involvement and investment that a national or an international company is normally not going to want to do. And so the opportunity is into those medium and smaller players in those local and regional markets to go after those opportunities. So I'm just going to highlight that little opportunity right here. Speaking of regions and comparisons, now I've seen this on a national level, that the places that locked down with COVID restrictions harder or stayed down, locked down longer. I'm going to leave the restrictions vague because every area implemented things differently, from travel to the types of business you could do to who was open, how long you were open, what you had to do in order to be open, all those things. That's a different discussion. Let's just say COVID lockdowns or restrictions. Those that were harsher and longer have more pain, more pinch points, even in real estate and new home construction, because of the trickle down effect of all of that stuff. The areas that opened up quicker or didn't lock down as hard, they worked through their pain and their pinch points quicker, and they are economically generally doing a lot better. And I don't know this because I just read the newspaper and it told me that. I know it because I have literally driven, put the thousands of miles on, and personally gone and visited with people in those different areas to go, oh, this feels different. How did you handle this? Oh, okay, cool. So I've personally verified some of that information. I'm not just parroting something that someone told me on that. Regionally here, and I'm going to start getting into more of the local scene. Let's compare Berks County to some of the regions or locales right around us. And I get hesitant because I get frustrated because, again, I don't mean to pick on people or just speak ill of anything here. But other locales have been more forward thinking than we have, and have implemented policies and opportunities that are paying off dividends for them now, but they did them 10 or 20 years ago. Lancaster's probably an easy one for this here. I watched Lancaster work with the county and the city to try and minimize the friction between their city and their county, and discuss infrastructure and roads to make sure that they were eliminating bottlenecks and trying to smooth out pinch points so that there would be the least amount of rub between a city and a county. And regionally, as we look kind of to our west, that has paid off in huge dividends as they've seen businesses move in, industries grow, housing communities from larger traditional subdivisions, as well as smaller, more modern multi-use communities grow up and flourish. And they've done it, all of that growth and development, while making their best effort to minimize those frictions and differences, because you're always going to have friction anytime you have change. And they recognize that, and they worked to minimize that. And that's been a huge part, I think, of the growth they've had on that side of us. Here in Berks County, we locked down pretty hard in the 20 to 30 year ago range in what kind of land would even be available for development. And this is tough. Our remodeling company does a lot of work in a lot of these neighborhoods. And, people buy a house, they want to build a deck, they want to put a patio or a pool. That's our bread and butter. It has been for 20 years. So I'm in and out of all of these neighborhoods. But we locked down a lot of the potentially available land that could have at some point been communities, and we held it off in different wetlands preserves, farmland preserves, and some things like that. And those are all valid. Those are all important. But using a little bit of a heavier hand of tax penalties or tax opportunities, because we are a little bit of a heavier taxed area, forced some of those things to be off the table forever. And so now you ended up with not just like shades of gray, but like black and white areas. And that creates tension and friction, because this area here, this township, this community is able to grow unrestricted because they didn't have this, 90% of their land was locked up. This area over here, it's dead, can't do anything. And then we also compounding that, we had some infrastructure issues. There's been study after study after study telling us that there is absolutely no problem with 222 heading north. There's no pinch points. There's no traffic restrictions. And frankly, this was, $400,000 spent on a traffic study to tell us that, yep, it's perfectly fine. And so through that, there's a disconnect between the communities and the business communities here in Berks County and Allentown. Now, that's a problem to us as we talk about real estate, because that means Berks County cannot as easily be a bedroom community for industry that is perhaps thriving in the Lehigh Valley, because people know there's real or imagined, doesn't actually matter, but there's a restriction here because there's not enough roads and not wide enough roads and convenient enough roads to go north. We all know on the southwest side of things with 222 again, it's sat as we had that side road to nowhere also, where it sat as an unfinished highway. And these two communities that had been more connected and had been similar in size grew apart. And Lancaster moved and grew its roots towards Harrisburg and down south, and really flourished in a few areas. And we didn't get any of that economic benefit and opportunity because we were kind of secluded here. And even though those roads are now in fantastic shape, those industries have grown separately and will not just homogeneously move right back together. To the east or southeast, we have 422, which is fantastic when you go through like the Oaks Interchange area and you're not facing sun glare and people moving through, or, you have those types of things. We no longer have residential rail lines tied into this area. So we've got lots of infrastructure that has been looked at, it's been studied, and it's been passed over for the last 20, 30, 40 years. And so we're left without the connectivity that would allow those mid to large companies to look at our area and say, maybe we'll put a factory in there. Maybe we'll move our regional offices to Reading or Wyomissing. And it just doesn't happen. And it can't happen without that forward-thinking planning. So that doesn't solve our problem today, but it's something to keep in mind as we look at forward. No one likes to hear, oh, they're bulldozing farms in order to build houses, but perhaps there's a way to protect farmlands in a way that doesn't cripple us and allows for some ebb and flow between those different needs of people groups in the future that perhaps we now don't understand or can't appreciate. And maybe we shouldn't be too restrictive, but walk carefully. We've also got a challenge as we look locally between the city and the surrounding communities and the county at large. At large, our county really is an agriculturally based county. There's still lots of farms, lots of farmland, and we're proud of that heritage and that hardworking heritage there. The city used to be an industrialized hotspot. I mean, it was phenomenal. If you know your history, it almost became Detroit with the car business until it didn't. And then other things happened in terms of which businesses did and didn't move into the area. And it is what it is today. From different people groups as well in different demographics that have settled in different parts of our county and haven't perfectly mixed together, we have a built-in bias or hesitation or discomfort even with different areas of our county interacting with other areas. For instance, I've talked to a whole lot of builders that say, in very colorful language that I'm trying to clean up here, that there is no way on the earth that they will ever service any clients in Reading proper. With good reason, because perhaps they've moved down there, they did some business down there, and their truck of tools was taken off their hands. Perhaps they had some people yelling at them. Perhaps they had a client that was difficult to interact with because there was a language barrier. Valid things need to be addressed, but that means that there are tradespeople that won't go downtown. We have a whole lot of people in communities around the city that would never dream of going to an event downtown at night. And it's perception, but perhaps they don't want the risk of having to park on the street, or they don't want to have to walk from an event venue to a parking garage because they're just a little uncertain. And they might face those same challenges if they did the same issue in Philadelphia or New York City, but it's enough removed that they don't feel the personal risks there. And so they're more than willing to drive to Philadelphia and go to an event there, but they won't drive downtown and go to an event there. So we have these built-in segmentations of society here that we haven't done a good job of breaking down those barriers. And when we've tried, perhaps City Walk or I think it was St. Joe's that wanted to put the hospital in, and a few of those other industries says, hey, let's revitalize some neighborhoods. Our local leadership, and I'm not picking on a party, I'm not picking on a person, I'm not picking on any sort of a placeholder here. Just things have stepped up to cripple that, and all of those opportunities have found satisfaction elsewhere. So a hospital will build somewhere else, a business will go somewhere else, a factory will take some other land somewhere else, and an entertainment venue will find its supporters will find some other way to build things. And so we have some baked in, built-in challenges into our area because we have not yet addressed our differences and figured out ways to build those inroads, break down those barriers, and work together in a little bit more of a homogeneous way. Probably conversations that should be held over alcohol and not in a Zoom call. So I'm just kind of calling that out and say those situations, those issues are here. It is what it is. Let's not ignore it, but let's seek for ways to improve it, because that's going to play into how we address housing stock, because all of those things affect where people will live, where they work, how they drive, where they shop, and all of that. So I feel like those are lots and lots of negatives that I've just given you. And my goal wasn't to rant, but rather just paint a very broad picture and try and funnel it down to as we look locally. Because of, I believe, what I've laid out in some of those institutional or infrastructure challenges of who we are locally, we've had local big builders that have broadened their scope and now don't just build in Berks County, but have communities regionally or even nationally that they've attempted to grow away from this area and not put the resources here. It's too hard here. Go make your money elsewhere. I can attest to that, saying that in my own neighborhood that is within the city limits, had I put that effort, the same amount of effort and financial resources anywhere but the city of Reading, my bank account would be substantially bigger right now. I've learned some good lessons. I'm not ashamed of that, and I'm thrilled to have made that investment stubbornly and done what I did. It's made me a better person, a better businessman. But I'm from a financial perspective, running away would have been easier than sticking it out. And so we've seen that play out as well in some bigger companies. We've also seen some regional players dip a toe in the market here in Berks County, but not necessarily, I would argue, in a serious manner. Perhaps they locked up one neighborhood, or they took over another neighborhood that they had the better infrastructure to be able to support, and they were able to finish building it out, and it was already through some of the development stages, something like that. But they're not moving in, and they haven't seen enough opportunity for them to move in and go, yeah, that's it. Let's rock and roll. Let's make that happen. We've also seen some small builders leave. Multi-generational builders that I've interacted with, the opportunity wasn't good enough for them, and the economic challenges over the last decade or so were high enough. It just wasn't worth it to them personally, and so they left. Even if it was a 3-generation old company, it didn't matter. There wasn't enough history here, and they just walked away and went elsewhere. And I can't personally blame them, having seen some of those challenges play out. So we don't have enough builders. We don't have enough big builders. We don't have enough medium builders. We don't have enough small builders. But I do honestly have some good news. First, it's affordable to finance a new home. It's ridiculously affordable, even for all of the challenges a decade ago, when we had the recession, and a little over a decade ago now, and we had the recession and lessons learned and changes in policies and everything else. It is freaking cheap to finance a house. And there are lenders out there. And if you have decent credit, you can go get a loan, and people will help you through that process. It's an awesome, awesome time to buy a house. It's just incredible. It really is. And homeownership, it's still desirable. It's the great American dream. And even though it's been tarnished, it hasn't been replaced or removed. It is, people want a piece of their own thing, something they can call home, especially if they're working from home. They might actually want to own that place instead of just renting it. I mean, everything is leading towards home ownership, and it still has long-term benefits. I think it's incredible to see that still play out. So we have people that can finance and want to finance and buy a home and own the piece of this, American dream. And I think that's going to be sustainable long-term. Nothing we've seen. I mean, we know inflation's coming. We know there's underlying inflation. We know at some point rates will change. Rates have already crept up a little bit, but they're still going to be attractive and affordable for the foreseeable future. Home ownership, it's going to be for the foreseeable future. People are still going to want a hunk of something. That isn't going to change. And so our market's not going to disappear. It's going to stay here. Our pain points will probably also stay here as well. So we got to get smarter about how we address those. You know how I mentioned earlier that local players know their markets better than anyone regionally or nationally, and will have kind of first dibs and the first opportunity to go chase down those local smaller opportunities and make something happen. That's all of us here on this call. You have networks that no international player could ever dream of having in this local marketplace. So rather than running to some different marketplace and starting new, you already have an existing network that you can massage and turn into something phenomenal. My encouragement is to look for new networks. Nothing wrong with a chamber breakfast or a Zoom happy hour or a meeting with like-minded people, or, since I'm talking to realtors, a meeting with a bunch of other realtors. That's all good. Like, keep that up. But also look for any other network that you can connect with, perhaps even in a less professional role. For instance, it's not a church group that you walk in and say, "Hi, I'm a realtor. Are you ready to buy or sell?" Not that you would ever do that, but it's rather looking for ways to connect with other people groups that perhaps you can just be involved, because that's where you kind of control and find those opportunities. And what I'm suggesting isn't just being involved in a little league where you'll overhear someone looking to sell a house. Well, "Oh, hey, I can help you with that." But it's actually just interacting with other people to go to find out, where's that property that's vacant? Where's that business that's seeking to grow that might need some additional support staff, or it might need, some regionalized housing to help with that, or something like that. Get creative and just troll for opportunities, just general opportunities, because they will possibly lead back to your primary business. And you're going to be better positioned than anyone else to go find those opportunities. Next, we got to keep our local politicians grounded and accountable. They make big promises when they're campaigning, and then they get in and they get involved, and things continue to happen the way they continue. They always worked. So this is our opportunity to find out who the local politicians are, make friends with them, keep them accountable, and help provide that feedback as they get insulated into a governmental environment. Keep them grounded, or look for opportunities to keep them grounded. Maybe not with a nasty letter writing campaign, but just a casual conversation here and there, so they hear how the environment around them is working and how they can perhaps make things a little bit better. So it's not just "Ooh, you signed the wrong bill, we don't like you, here's 50 letters or 100 phone calls," but they can't have that constant feedback, because they might not go looking for it. Maybe we can find ways to just gently keep them grounded. And because if we can keep them grounded, we can keep them accountable. Also, look for opportunities to foster communications with local municipalities. So this is getting away from that like elected politician to more of the staff position, or the hired individuals that are in different municipalities locally. So it's going to be city as well as the surrounding municipalities here in the county. It could be the individual that is operating as a front desk secretary. It could be a code enforcement officer. It could even be a mechanic. All of those kinds of people, they know what is and isn't working, the frustrations, who's complaining because the storm sewers are always overflowing because it wasn't put together well in that area. it ties back to where will your clients want to live in sort of what neighborhoods, but also where those pinch points are. Pinch points are opportunities. Pain can bring potential if it's addressed right. And so keeping tabs with those people also helps to bring the politicians, tie them into the local policymakers and the implementers, and tie those businesses together so they don't become too disconnected. Also, this is going to probably sound self-serving, so I apologize in advance, and just discount it if you need to. Okay, look out for the little guy. Seek them out. Look for those small builders. Find the guys that maybe it's a little bit of a handmade sign, and it's not a fancy billboard, but it's a guy that's like, I've never seen him before, but they're building a house over there. Interesting. I wonder who that is. Introduce yourself. Find out about them. Some of these small builders that might build 1 or 2 houses a year, and the owner is on site probably almost every day. If they build 2 houses a year, they could probably build 3. They could probably build 4. You see where I'm going here? You have a handful of small builder contacts that could, with a little bit of support and encouragement and nudging, easily handle a little bit more business. You've now got an inroad to a builder that's probably a more personable individual, not a big corporation, that could work with a buyer who perhaps their credit's not ready yet, or they're still trying to figure out what they want. And maybe you can make that introduction and help streamline things there just a little bit. And that small builder already has all of the trades, all of the subs, and yeah, they could probably take on 1 extra project for that good contractor that they always will do anything for. So you're not reinventing the wheel. You're just helping the small guys grow just a little bit. And I think that is one of the biggest opportunities we have here in Berks County to improve our housing stock, because all of those builders already have those resources, and with just a little bit of nudging and help, no big campaign, just a one-on-one, I think that's where we'll see a lot of our housing pain satisfied probably quickly as well, because they're a little more nimble and they're going to be able to move better than a regional builder could be convinced to set up a local office here and start the process from scratch. Another thing, I'd encourage you to be disciplined and focus on running a really good, consistent business. Follow up on those past prospects, those past leads, those past tradespeople that you haven't talked to, or maybe they help facilitate with a past client or something else. Reach out to those people. Just remind them that you're still in existence. Ask them how they're doing. Buy them a coffee. Any sorts of little contacts, but it's the stuff that has no discernible payoff today. It might not even this year, but just those little tiny things of running a good, boring day in, day out business that will have the long-term benefits. So as these opportunities arrive, you have the network in place, you know who you can trust, you know who you communicate with well, or you connected well with, that you can have confidence to make the additional contacts. It's the boring business stuff, but it does pay off over time. And we've seen that in our own company, going back to my remodeling firm, with a 20-year history, where generally 30 to 50% of our business is repeat, referral, or past prospects. Those boring business things of answering phones, getting back to people, following up. We fail, we're not perfect, but we measure it. And doing the generic stuff is a bigger key to our success than any one-time award or big project or something else like that. So just an encouragement that those things do matter, and it's worth doing, and it's worth implementing into your day-to-day business. So guys, I rambled a lot, and that's it on my side. I just wanted to share kind of a perspective of a local guy that goes all over, interacts, and has a local business. Open it up. Any questions? Anything I can answer for anyone?
John, I was just going to ask you if you wanted to kind of like bring up or broach the subject of, like the assessments, since we have Matt, as a builder in Berks, and he's definitely mentioned some experience with Lancaster and other surrounding counties. So like we've been talking with David Hunter and the county about how we do assessments on new construction here in Berks County. And I wanted to know, like, from your perspective, is that something that builders consider when you're looking at potentially building here in Berks versus doing a project in Lancaster, who does assessments a little bit differently than we do?
I'll speak from my limited perspective as a builder, recognizing that other companies will view things a little bit differently. It is definitely a concern, and it's a component of the overall basket of challenges we have here locally. So it's something that needs to be addressed and considered, but it in and of itself is not the only thing to be concerned about. I will say, I think we have a little bit of a grace period right now because the real estate market in general is so hot, and prices and values are going up so quickly right now that it's helping to offset some of those perceived concerns. So it doesn't eliminate it, it still needs to be solved, but we maybe don't have to rush a solution if it's going to take a little bit more time to get it just right.
Okay. One of the other questions that I was just wondering, we hear a lot from builders about certain municipalities in Berks that are more open to new construction or new like subdivisions, things like that. And then there's some municipalities in Berks that are just like, absolutely not. We don't want any new residential construction. We like things more rural, and we want to kind of keep it more protected, agricultural land protected and everything like that. So how do you handle that? Do we have an overabundance of those municipalities where we could be doing more building? Or is it just kind of like the mindset that we kind of need to overcome, over time?
I think the 80-20 rule applies there. The areas that are apologize if I hit any sensitive topics. If they're pro-growth, pro-business, pro-building, more open, less restricted, if it's a community like that, we see it happening on the national front and we feel it happening here locally. But those areas that are open to growth are going to see the greatest economic benefit long-term. And I think our efforts will be rewarded in encouraging them to grow intelligently and to continue growing, rather than focusing on a community that might be very stuck in their ways, very tight, very restrictive, and trying to get them to change. That puts things into a little bit more of a tight fight, and that's harder to accomplish a win than when you can just kind of steer and nudge and merge and encourage. I think our efforts will be best focusing where there's already wins and looking for bigger wins, rather than going after those that want to be tightly restricted. And it's unfortunate, but you can't fix that sometimes, and it just has to play out.
Okay.
Brittany,
John-
mind if I chime in
Yeah,
a little bit? First of all, Matt, great presentation. Just a little bit of context as to kind of how our bar has been playing into this sort of things. We've been meeting with, county officials and city officials talking about the need for new construction. That assessment issue that I think Brittany had talked about was something that actually Fred Levering, I think, was the one who a year or now more ago had brought up at one of these meetings. And we're trying to get that rolling. But as you said, it is a just one piece of the entire puzzle, and there's definitely no silver bullets. I particularly, when we're talking about municipalities and the process for getting a new construction approved, I think about those small builders who don't have the resources, don't have the cash flow to spend a year going back and forth with a zoning board that doesn't have their act together. And to be perfectly fair to some of these municipalities, I mean, it definitely depends on what kind of infrastructure is in place. If you have a municipality with excess sewer, excess water, that can handle more capacity, not only should they allow it, but they should want it too, because if you have 2,000 residents on a system that can handle 4,000 residents, those 2,000 residents are paying for twice the amount of water capacity and twice the amount of infrastructure they need. And it would be to their benefit to bring more people in and more new construction. And I definitely think there's a misconception in a lot of parts of Berks County and just the region where new construction means higher taxes because new construction means kids, and more kids means what is it, we spend about $19,000 per kid and we get $5,000 in property taxes once the home is built every year. Therefore, that's a $14,000 deficit that you're going to get. It's the math doesn't add up when you get down to it. Adding one kid doesn't translate to a $19,000 hole in the deficit. So I think there is a misconception there. Obviously, we need to be building in communities that are designed for it and that want it. It doesn't make a ton of sense to, build a huge subdivision in like Ole Township compared to somewhere closer to, Reading or closer to, Hamburg, where all those logistics centers are coming up. But this was an amazing presentation. It was very insightful, and it's something that is, I think, an issue that we just need to keep pushing on. So thank you so much, Matt.
Yeah.
My pleasure.
I just have one last question, and this is going to be a thinker, but as a builder, if there was one thing that we could do, and like within reach, here in Berks County to help incentivize new construction, what would that look like to the builders?
That's a great That's a
I know
great
that's a hard
question.
one, but
What do we just say about silver bullets?
yeah.
Yeah, as I think a couple of things could work, and I'd actually steer away from anything with a dollar value attached to it. I don't think that's necessary, but there's something I think would pay off big long term is to celebrate the wins. So if you have a small builder or a large builder, it doesn't matter actually. If you have a builder that you've worked with that was good to work with, they communicated well, they followed through on the specs and details, timelines were appropriate, whatever it was, if it was a good interaction, celebrate it. Find a way to highlight that among your peers as well as on social media. Call them out in a post, something else like that. I think if you highlight the positives and the positive builders, they'll feel good about it. It'll improve the relationship between you and them, and it will also subtly signal to anyone else on your peers that, hey, this is a good company, work with them, there's good people over there, call them if you need something. I think that will have perhaps the biggest benefit possible.
Okay. I mean, I definitely think that's something we could work on for sure with our members for sure. Brandon, do you have any last questions or comments or anything that you wanted to share?
No, I mean, we're late for closing. Me and Pat. No, that's fine. I mean, I know some things that we've discussed in the past that I'm not going to ask a direct question, but are the issues of how long it takes to get approved and how long some of these builders, and a lot of reason why they are moving, because it's easier, it's overall easier in other counties, where Berks County, it's just, there's always a holdup. It takes longer. The permits required and how long it takes to get heard on what their ideas are is very, very rough on them. So why not go? If I was them, I would go somewhere else too. So, I mean, those are some things that I think would be good, is if it just be easier for the builders to get heard and get in the door as well.
Yeah.
Right now, that's why a lot have left, and the amount. We have a very old school mindset on amount. Most people want 5 bedrooms for $100,000, and right now the builders can't do that. I mean, we know that. So when they see new construction prices, they freak out. So bringing industry into the area and more jobs would greatly help as well.
Good insight. All right. Well, I mean, I think that's all the question. I mean, unless anybody else has any questions, but I mean, I'm good. Does anybody else have anything that they want to ask?
I'm good.
Okay, if not, then we're gonna let you go. Thanks again, Matt, so much. And
My
if we
pleasure.
have to do a more comprehensive or larger panel discussion, with some of the builders later on this year, would you be interested in participating?
Oh, absolutely. Some of the bigger builders, they've got more experience in this local community and might even have a more robust administrative staff or something else like that. And so they'll have some really cool input, and having that back and forth is always brings value.
Yeah.
So yeah.
All
let's do it.
right. We'll plan it out. All right. Thank you so much, Matt.
My pleasure, guys. Have an awesome day. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Bye.